to be in this iconic theater. And I thank all of you for being out here this evening to discuss some matters. I'm going to give you a news bulletin. We just won Wyoming. Which is the 8th contest in the last 9 that we have won. And now we are in New York. New York has the chance to really make history. If we win here, if we beat Secretary Clinton, are we going to win? And everybody here knows that this campaign is not just about electing a president. It is about transforming America. It is about making it clear from coast to coast, and I've been all over this country. The American people are tired of the same old establishment politics and establishment economics. They are tired of a government that is dominated by wealthy campaign contributors. They are tired of an economy where almost all new income and wealth goes to the top 1%. They are tired of a corrupt campaign finance system in which billionaires are buying elections, and they are tired of a broken criminal justice system which has more people in jail than any other country on earth. And we're going to end that. All right? We're going to invest in our young people in jobs and education, not jails. We have come a very long way in the last 11 months, but we can win this thing. There is a path toward the White House, and don't let anybody tell you there is not. And our goal, and we're beginning to see this, is to see people from across this country stand up and fight back. I don't have to tell anybody in this beautiful theater tonight that the history of change, real change in America, never occurs from the top on down. It always happens from the bottom on up. Whether it is the history of the trade union movement, whether it is history of the civil rights movement, the history of the women's movement, the gay movement, the Fight for 15 movement. Just think, if we were here 5 years ago and somebody said, you know, Bernie, this $7.25 minimum wage is a disaster, it's a starvation wage, and we've got to raise it to $15 an hour, the person next to them would have said, $15 an hour? You're nuts. You're thinking too big. You're too radical. Can't be done. But then you know what happened? People in the fast food industry fought back. People at McDonald's and at Burger King, they made it clear they can't live on $15 an hour. They went out on strike. They went out on the streets. And I'm very proud to have demonstrated with them in Washington, D.C. And then because they fought back, Seattle, $15 an hour. LA, San Francisco, Oregon, California, New York State. And trust me, it wasn't because your governor had a great idea that he wanted to do it. It's because the people told him he had better do it. And that's what this campaign is about. It's bringing people together, black and white, and Latino and Asian American and Native American, all of our people, to stand together, to think outside of the box, to understand what the media does not tell us, Status quo does not have to continue to exist. We can make that change. We don't need to have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth. We do not need to see 1 in 4 kids in the Bronx have asthma because of the crap that they are breathing. We do not need to continue to see gentrification, which is driving working people out of their neighborhoods. We do not need to have more people in jail than any other country. We do not need to be the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care or paid family leave for all of the people. So don't let anybody tell you that our options are this narrow, to think small. We don't have to think small. This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. And when we stand together, we can make profound changes. That is what this campaign is about. And I want to thank all of you for being here. Let me thank Erica for doing. Erica went through a nightmarish experience, an experience that no child should have to go through. And you can respond to that tragedy in one of 2 ways. You can become depressed, you can become withdrawn. 90-year-old, how are you? I see where Erica gets her energy from. And her grandma would have withdrawn, and that would have been totally understandable. I think every one of us would have understood that. But she didn't. She used her grief and her pain to fight back and to say that we will have real police department reform. And thank you so much. And what can we say about this guy? Harry Belafonte is one of the great American entertainers for decades. But he has, that's the point. That's right, we've known him as a great entertainer, but not everybody in America knows that for decade after decade after decade, he has been there fighting the fight for racial justice, social justice. He was there with Dr. King. Yes, I gotta admit, I'm old enough. I was there at the March on Washington. What do we say about Nina Turner? Former state senator from Ohio, and she had incredible courage. And that, I think it's no great secret that in every state in this country we're taking on the entire Democratic establishment. Nina was a former supporter of Secretary Clinton, but she heard what we were trying to do in this campaign, and she came over, and she has been an incredible asset. Y'all ready?
Yeah.
All right, let's get to some questions here.
We're gonna get to y'all in a minute. Let me get a few out first of all. Let's start with the term super predators. Now, earlier this week, Bill Clinton made some very disturbing comments to defend Secretary Clinton's now infamous super predator comments and disparage the Black Lives Matter activists.
Yes.
What are your thoughts about what he said, Senator Sanders?
Unacceptable. We all know what that term meant when, in the context that it was said years ago.
Yeah.
We know who they were talking about.
That's right.
Yep.
That's exactly right. And I think that the president owes the American people an apology for trying to defend indefensible. But let me, if I may, say it was not just that. During that period, a piece of legislation called the so-called Welfare Reform Act was passed. You all remember that? And the premise, which was a right-wing Republican premise, was that the problem was that all of these poor people were really living high off the hog. They were all the quote-unquote welfare queens. Remember that? All these poor people just living so well on welfare. And that bill was passed, and the result of it was that extreme poverty for the poorest of the poor went up very significantly in our country. And what that politics is about, what that psychology is about, is to adopt the Republican belief that the way you get votes is beating up on the poorest and most vulnerable people in this country. That is a bad, bad way to win votes. To beat up on people who are helpless, who are barely making it economically, and to go after them to win votes and to cut benefits for children, for moms, is unacceptable. And we are going to put an end to that mentality. We're not going to be beating up on the poor. If you notice, in much of today's political discussion, the word poverty is virtually not mentioned. You know that? It's not mentioned. We got 47 million people living in poverty. We have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth. I'm going to put the issue of poverty back on the table. And we'll continue to talk about it, but first point is I think President Clinton owes the American people an apology for defending the indefensible.
Brother Belafonte, I'd like to know what you thought of Senator Mr. Clinton's comments.
First of all, let me just say that I am now at the threshold of my 90th year in life. I have lived long enough to see Bernie Sanders step into the fray and to put some skin in the game. That's kind of reawakened my youthful spirit. I spent a great deal of time traveling around the United States of America. I did that as a performer, but I now do this as an activist. I don't run for political office, but I do run for justice. The thousands of young men and women that I've visited in the prisons of America know what it is to look at justice dismissed and forgotten.
That's right.
And I am just absolutely thrilled to have been given the opportunity to stand on a platform with a man that has the integrity and the dignity and the ability to lead this country into a new horizon.
Thank you.
Bernie Sanders has decided not to put any negative vibes into this campaign. It is with a great deal of difficulty that I support that point of view. Those who oppose Bernie Sanders are those who would choose to defile him, those who would choose to minimize what he's about, does this country a great disservice. What America needs is exactly what Bernie Sanders is giving us. And if we blow this opportunity, we will have blown the opportunity to change America for the foreseeable future. So in answer to your question, I'll just say, Hillary who? We have been there and done that.
Erica, do you want to make a comment on Erica, do you want to make a comment on President Bill Clinton's comments?
I just want to say that Bernie is going to be our next president.
Senator Sanders, what further steps would you take as president to further demilitarize our law enforcement, to end what has been the experience of many African Americans who feel they live in something equated to a police state or an occupied territory?
We have seen in Ferguson, Missouri, what that appeared to me to look like is literally an occupying army, didn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, with his military equipment, you thought that they were in Iraq invading some community.
Yeah.
Police departments, good police departments, and I was a mayor for 8 years and we tried to run a good police department, is part of the community. It is not something that is oppressing the community, not something that is feared by the community. So what we have got to do is to make certain that the federal government is not providing this heavy-duty military equipment to local police departments. Now, police departments, let me say a word in general about this. You all know police departments are run by municipalities, not the federal government, but the federal government can play a very significant way in a lot of respects, both with the carrot and with the stick. What the federal government can do with the Department of Justice is establish an idea of what a model police department looks like. And what a model police department looks like, number one, is one that is demilitarized, one in which the department reflects, the members of the department reflect the diversity of the community they're serving. And also, it means that we end corporate control and ownership of prisons and detention centers. Now, what a well-trained police department is doing, and some are beginning to do this, is to understand that we should not and must not continue seeing what we saw with regard to Erica's father. Or see unarmed people being shot by police officers, often minority people.
Yeah.
And what we have got to train police officers to do is to understand that lethal force is the last response, not the first response. I'll give you an example. This is in my state. Not a minority community. Think about this for a moment. A young man has had very serious mental issues and he was acting out. His mother called the police to get some help. Police officer shot and killed her son. This happens far, far too often.
Yep.
So being a cop is not an easy job. We all know that. And most of the police officers I know try hard to do the right thing, and they're honest. But, when a police officer breaks the law, like any other public official, that officer must be held accountable. And I think one of the ways we do that, and this is what I will fight for, is that any person in America who is killed while being apprehended by a police officer or dies in police custody, Sandra Brand, that death will automatically trigger a Department of Justice investigation. What the federal government can do, and I think play a very important role in this, again, with the carrot, providing financial support or withdrawing financial support, create model police departments where police officers are respected, are part of the community, are serving the community, not bringing fear into the community. And one other word that I want to say on this, and some people may agree with me, some people may not. But I think we've got to rethink this entire war on drugs. Millions of people have been arrested and some have been imprisoned for dealing with marijuana or possessing marijuana. All right, lives have been impacted. You're a young person, you got a police record, you're going out trying to get a job. You know what? Ain't so easy. All right. So that is why I believe that right now when you have the Federal Controlled Substance Act having marijuana as a Schedule I drug, that's the highest level, right alongside of heroin, that's pretty crazy. So I think we're going to we have legislation in that will take marijuana out of the Federal Controlled Substance Act. And here, when we talk about criminal justice, this is really interesting. Turns out that the black community and the white community do marijuana at about equal rates. But you know what? Blacks are 4 times more likely to be arrested than whites. Okay, I went on too long, sorry.
Well, I agree with what Senator Sanders had to say, and my son is a police officer. My husband was a former police officer, so I certainly see it from both sides. And we need more young men and young women of color to be in those police departments, so I'm so proud that my baby is a police officer. But, I was in Cleveland, and many of you know the story of young Tamir Rice, the 12-year-old on the playground who was shot less than 2 seconds from the time that the officers hit the playground. And there is no doubt that the weapon that Tamir had, it was a toy weapon, it did look real, but my problem was this. You're supposed to give somebody the opportunity to give up.
Thank you.
That's number one. Number two, Ohio is an open carry state, so I don't understand why they pulled out on them like that. But no baby should die in that way. And what happened to him, what happened to John Crawford III in Beaver Creek, who was shopping in a Walmart where they sell guns. He picked up the weapon, he's walking around the store and he's on the phone talking to somebody, and the police come in and gun him down and never give him a chance to give up. None of that should happen. That not only do Black lives matter, Black lives have mattered for a very long time, but human lives matter. And one of the things that I love about the senator is that when we were in Cleveland, Ohio, Senator, you may remember this, and I think it was in August, and there were about 10,000 people there or so, give or take, and most of those people were, as Dr. West would say, our vanilla sisters and brothers. And Senator Sanders said these words. He said, as the next president of the United States of America, I will do everything in my power to eradicate institutional racism. That is real. That is real. Woo! And unfortunately, historically, our police have been told to do some pretty bad, I mean, you look at the history in this country that police were policing black communities, not to protect and serve, but to hold hostage. Yes. And so we need to train police differently. There are implicit biases in this country, and we need to admit that and confess that and do a better job. But the police are not our enemies, it's just some of them. And I want to close with this. I'm on a task force appointed by my governor. That's a whole nother story, but I got to give Governor Casey credit for that. I will. After Tamir Rice was shot, the governor did not hesitate to create that task force. But a young man, as we traveled the state, said, he came up to the mic, he said, we have a no-snitch culture among the criminal element. Why do we have a no-snitch culture among the police? That bad, good police officers need to speak up and speak out.
How do we get more people of color to want to be police officers? Because a lot of times in our culture, we've been taught F the police, not to want to be a part of that system. How do we get more of us to be a part of that system?
I mean, we got to restore it in the schools, and being a police was a noble thing. I mean, I know growing up, people wanted to be police and firemen, and we just have to have those very real conversations in our community, just as we want folks to become teachers. We have to speak that life into our children, that we need them to stand in the gap. We need more women, because women de-escalate situations. We de-escalate. I'm just saying, we bring the temperature down. As a community, and I mean the community of community, we do have to encourage our young women and our young men to be police. Because to see African American, Latino, and Asian, and Native American, to see police officers of color brings a whole nother dynamic in the room. It should matter that you're in the room, sisters and brothers. And so we got to speak that life into our children, encourage them to be in law enforcement.
Absolutely. Describe how your economic plan provides for a reinvestment in the distressed neighborhoods, and also how do we assist those who have yet to experience the economic recovery in their lives and see it in their communities?
Well, there are a lot of people who have not seen much economic recovery in recent years, and especially in the African American community. So let me just go over a few things. When you read on the front pages of the papers that unemployment in America is 5%, it's not true. There's another government statistic that talks about real unemployment, people who are giving up looking for work, and people who are working part-time and they want to work full-time. So the real number is 10%, and in the African American community it is a lot higher than that. For young African kids between 17 and 20 who graduated high school, real unemployment is, as I said earlier, 51%. Right? And that is beyond outrageous. It is, think about how many lives of kids that go to school, they graduate school, going out looking for a job, I can't get a job, I can't get a job, I get rejected. 3 years later, I got no money, I got no income. What kind of life do I have? All right, so we have to deal with that. So number one, I believe that at a time when we are spending and have spent trillions of dollars fighting a war in Iraq that we never should have fought in the first place. Hard for me to understand how we don't have the money to invest in crumbling inner cities all over this country. All right, we've got the money, of course we got the money. It's a question of national priorities and where we invest. In good schools, when we invest in water systems so the children are not being poisoned, when we invest in ending pollution so the kids are not getting asthma, when we invest in affordable housing so people can live in the communities they grew up in, when we rebuild in my state, many of our bridges are in disrepair, roads in terrible shape, rail system nowhere near where it used to be. We can create 13 million jobs rebuilding our crumbling inner cities and our infrastructure. Now, what an extraordinary thing it would be to be training young kids who today are unemployed, training them to be carpenters and plumbers, architects, to be learning how to install solar energy, to do all of those things to transform inner cities throughout this country. So to answer your question, number one, we change our national priorities. No more tax breaks for billionaires. Number two, federal investments and federal contracts should go to the communities that need it the most. If we're going to get a handle on why we have so many people in jail, we got to get a handle on high rates of youth unemployment. And I cannot see any group of people who can do a better job in putting young kids to work than small and medium-sized African-American businesses. So we've got to make sure, which is not the case now, we've heard this over and over again, that minority businesses are not getting a fair share of the contracts being dispensed by the federal government or the kind of help they need. So I think those are the combination of things that we have to do.
Affordable college!
Oh, well, let me say a word, all right. Just responding to the latest question, all right. Let me say this. You know, I talk about this every day. Today, a college degree is equivalent to what a high school degree was 50 years ago. You all know what I mean by that? Yeah. 50 years ago, you had a high school degree, you were pretty well educated within the society. You can, in most cases, go out and get a pretty good middle-class job. That was the reality then. The world has changed, the economy has changed, technology has changed. Simple truth, which is pretty undeniable, is that people simply need more education. So when we talk about public education today, it's not good enough to simply talk about the first grade through the 12th grade. That's what we've had now. That's what we've had for 100 years. That was great back then. But the world has changed. So I believe that when we talk about public education today, what that must mean is free tuition at public colleges and universities. Some people think this is a radical idea. This is not a radical idea. It exists in Germany. It exists in Scandinavia and countries around the world. And guess what? Guess what? Used to exist in the United States 40 or 50 years ago, right? You had some of the great public colleges and universities in the world. City College. College, Queens College, University of California, other great schools. I'm not talking about schools. These were some of the best colleges and universities in America, and at that point, tuition was virtually free. So what we have got to ask ourselves, if we could have free colleges and universities 50 years ago, why in God's name can we not do that today? And that's what we say.
Why do you think people that oppose Senator Sanders say the things that he's saying is crazy, like as far as affordable health care and free college?
Lack of vision and imagination. And haterism. You know, some folks just hate on you when they don't have the same passion and determination and vision. We want a leader that's visionary. That is what Senator Bernie Sanders is, a visionary before his time. And, you know, I would love it. I know we're going to get Mr. Belafonte and Sister Erica in this, but for me, you know, and I said this before, but Robert Browning said that man's reach should exceed his grasp. You know, what is heaven for if we can't hope, believe, and dream? We are motivated by hope. Hope gets us up every morning. Once we stop hoping and believing that we can do better, what's the use of going on? And so it just boggles my mind. As I said, Congresswoman Barbara Jordan said what the people want is simple. They want an America as good as its promise. When Senator Sanders talks about universal health care, that's an America as good as its promise. When he talks about college education, free tuition, pre-K to college, that's an America as good as its promise. When he talks about the 4 violences that impact black and brown folks, the 5 violences that impact black and brown folks, that's creating an America as good as its promise. When he talks about paid family and medical leave, that's creating America as good as its promise. Man, I mean, why would you want a leader that wants to talk about incrementalism? You know, Sister Rose, I grew up poor. And when you poor, you don't want to hear nobody talking about they're going to take their time to help you out. Woo!
Why do you think they try to paint Senator Sanders as crazy? Because you've seen a few of these.
In response to your question, I'd like to embellish my response a wee bit. The United States of America, when the founding fathers came to this hemisphere, to this continent, they found a people here who had been living here for thousands of years, who had lived in harmony with the land, and had welcomed those who came as visitors to this continent. We call them the founders of Plymouth Rock. In developing a relationship to this continent, the invading forces from Europe eliminated an entire race, eliminated the indigenous. The Native Americans were ground under in pain. When there was a successful resistance against that fact and seeking change, it was replaced by 100 years of segregation. This country is steeped in the sickness of race. Almost everything that we do can be traced in some of its villainy to the issues of race. And when I hear Senator Sanders speak about changing the educational landscape, there's more to this whole thing than just giving the opportunity for students to attend school without economic burden and without economic sacrifice. What we would have to do is to begin to have a discourse to change the content of the curriculum. And my real commitment to Senator Sanders is not just all the issues that he's raised on what America needs in a universe that's quite complicated with issues that boggles the human mind. We have wars everywhere. We have thievery everywhere. We have greed that has run rampant with the soul of this nation that has to be healed. And Dr. King and Eleanor Roosevelt and others have said so often during my history. And my real hope is that after we've gotten the administration going, that we would really and truly invest heavily into the issue of defining what happened in this nation around the issues of race and changing the way in which America treats its citizens of color, and that we be given an opportunity to participate and contribute as fully as we can. That's what I got up out of my bed and decided.
Now, before we turn the Q&A over to the audience, I do want to ask and understand this. Why does it seem like you are the only candidate that hasn't been afraid to speak about systemic racism? Because, you hear these politicians talk about the super predators, but they don't like to talk about the system that created the super predators.
I can't talk about other people, I can just talk about myself. Maybe it has something to do, and this is personal. I'm not one who likes to talk about myself very much. It's something a little bit uncomfortable. But I think most of you know I'm Jewish. But this is about, you talk about racism, you talk about insanity, you talk about cruelty. I can remember as a kid, tears coming down my eyes, knowing that much of my father's family was wiped out by a lunatic in Germany. And that stays with you. It's something that you never forget. And to see racism or people hating each other for the color of their skin or for the accent that they may have, the language of the country they came from, is from the deepest part of me something that is so grotesque and awful that from a very early age, it was clear to me that I had to spend my life helping to oppose that type of behavior. I can just tell you, when I was a kid, I went to one year here at Brooklyn College, and then my mother died during that year, and I decided to, I grew up, I grew up in my accent, I think, gives me away. After 50 years in Vermont, I'm afraid I still have that accent. But my mom died when she was young, and I left Brooklyn College, and I went to the University of Chicago. When I was there, I became involved in the civil rights movement. Some of you may remember the Congress of Racial Equality Corps, James Farmer and those guys. And we did a little bit of work that we could financially supporting the people who were getting their heads broken in the South, but we also worked on segregated housing and segregated schools in Chicago. And you remember in 1968, there was the police riot at the Democratic Convention? Yes. You're too young to remember that. Most of us. Well, I learned about the Chicago Police Department before that. I was arrested, got the opportunity to meet the Chicago Police Department first time. Quite an experience, I will tell you. And then in 1963, went to the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Yes. And that was, Dr. King is, one of my heroes and one of the inspirations in my life. And I'll tell you, just if I may, I'm going off subject a little bit. Is that all right? Yes. All right. You know what was extraordinary about Dr. King? I'm detouring, but why I have so much respect for him. He obviously was a great civil rights leader, led the effort to desegregate the South and voting rights and all that. And he could have gone down. The establishment in America would have said, Dr. King, you are a great hero. Look at all you did. But you know what he did? He went into his heart and he said, that is not enough. Yes, if I'm going to talk about nonviolence, right, I got to look at the war in Vietnam. Yes. To jump in on this discussion, I would love to hear his point of view, because he worked with Dr. King. Right. But against all of the establishment, people said, what are you doing? You're supposed to be a black leader. Why are you getting involved in the war in Vietnam? And he said his heart and his conscience dictated that he speak out. How could he talk about nonviolence in this country if you talk about a war which was so unnecessary and so bad? And suddenly, and Harry, you jump in and correct me if I'm wrong here, but a lot of his liberal contributors stopped contributing. They said, you're going beyond where you're supposed to go. You're a black leader. You can deal with civil rights. We don't want you talking about foreign policy. Okay. And then he went even further. And he made the point, he said, of course we have to destroy segregation. But what does it matter if we open up restaurants and hotels, but people don't have the money to be able to go into those restaurants and into those hotels? So then he began talking about income and wealth inequality. And everybody here remembers where he was when he was assassinated. It wasn't in a quote-unquote civil rights march. He was standing with sanitation workers who were being exploited in Memphis, Tennessee. And he chose to stand with the lowest among us. People who did dirty work, no pay, bad working conditions. He went there and he stood with them. And also, some of you will remember, and Harry, you know more about this than I do, the project that he was working on in the last months in his life, the Poor People's Campaign. And what he was saying is, we're going to bring together the African American community, the Latino community, the Native American communities, poor whites in Appalachia and elsewhere. We're going to bring all of our people together to demand a change in national priorities. That's what he said. This is a wealthy country. We should not have the kind of poverty that we have right now. That is the sign of incredible courage and genius to keep expanding and expanding his vision for America. That's what Nina's talking about. So, I don't know how I got off on that. The point is that everything, and that's what he saw so brilliantly, and with so much courage. He knew what he was doing. He knew that he was going to antagonize the establishment by doing that. But he kept going because it was the right thing to do, and that is what his mind and his heart told him to do. And that's where we are in many ways right now. We're asking these same questions. Why, at a time when this country has so much wealth, is there so much poverty? Why are people sleeping on the streets? Why are schools failing? We would have a different discussion if we were a poor country. All right, if we were a poor country, we would like to see kids have a good education. We're too poor, right? We'd like everybody to have health care. We don't have the money to train doctors. That is not the case. All right? The case is that you got a Wall Street, you got a corporate world whose greed is doing so much damage to all of us. I apologize again for returning.
It's all good. Mr. Belafonte, did you want to expound on anything that was said?
I just firmly believe that all of the complicated mechanisms that go to make up the political process, that more deeply needed in this nation is the ability for citizens to talk to one another and to discover who we really are. And I've watched many a candidate in their turn at bat in running for the race of officers all over this country, get into these issues and talk very eloquently because of the imperatives involved in the moment. There is that platform that people use when they're talking about getting elected. They say everything that is politically correct, that is politically seductive. Yet you have to watch what happens in all of the hours and the minutes and the time in between. What do you really use your life to do in relationship to changing the ills that this country faces? And I think if we can open up the process of being more honest on the issue of race, on the issue of gender, on the issue of greed, I think America will become a healthier place for all of us. And what I really and truly feel, having served Eleanor Roosevelt as a kid growing up here, born in and growing up in Harlem, having my eye teeth cut on social activism during the labor strife, and sleeping car porters and all of those who came out of Harlem, serving Dr. King, serving during the Second World War on the issues of fascism and the war to what they said the war to end all wars. It was really the war to begin to have a discourse on what that war was about. Because we're still having wars today, most of them deeply driven by racial and economic circumstances. And what I would appreciate and hope and feel we will get from Bernie Sanders is not just his capacity to administrate as the head of the state and the leader of this nation, but to begin to put on an everyday basis the language and the verbiage to give us a chance to speak on the issues of race. If we do not, Dr. King said, if we do not settle the issues of race in America, we will never settle America's hope to become one of the great nations in the history of civilization. So, with Senator Sanders, with what he has said, with what he is about, I believe America has been given yet again another opportunity to overcome the obstacles that are before us, being led by those who understand clearly what needs to be done.
That's right.
And I would hope, and especially I say this without, well, I say it because it needs to be said. In particular, if you look at every ill and every grievance that can be revealed by the voice of the black community, you'll find that politics sits squarely in the middle of what can be done to cure the problem. We are having a large prison population because of how the law has been fixed. We have poverty because of how the law has been fixed. The only thing that can change the way these laws are applied is by getting out and vote and changing those who sit in office and make the rules. And I deeply believe that Bernie Sanders gives us the opportunity to change the dialogue, to change the way we do business. Don't be afraid of change. Change is our only hope.
That's right.
And diversity is our gift. I say, let's get out and work hard. Let the black community awaken to get out and don't treat the vote like it doesn't belong to you. As a matter of fact, it's truly the only weapon you got. Woo!
Yes, I want to say something.
Why have you chosen to stand next to Senator Sanders, Erica?
Why I chose to stand next to him. He's a protester. Look at our nation and what's going on now. People are dying at massive rates and it's being broadcast on the TV.
Yes.
And no one is doing anything about it. No one is speaking out as much as Bernie Sanders has been speaking out about it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's opened my eyes to so much, like, he opened my eyes to like the economic struggle that we're going through. Yes, I was grieving about my dad, but my struggles every day. On top of losing my dad, on top of my dad being exploited by artisans and politicians and stuff. But what I want to say is, the reason why I wanted to be involved in a political process or whatever, because enough is enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, who is going to care about us if we don't care about ourselves?
Yeah.
And I want to bring to everyone's attention, the presidential race is not the only thing that's going on right now. Every Democrat is up for election. A whole bunch of Democrats said Black Lives Matter or Harry Garner, and where are they? That's who else said Black Lives Matter. Bill de Blasio, Governor Cuomo, lot about corruption and corrupted Wall Street or whatever, but look at Hillary Clinton. She's standing with 2 mayors, Rahm Emanuel and Bill de Blasio, that's covering up murders. What I'm saying is, we need to become involved in the political process because all these people is up for election right now. We need them out and get new people in.
Woo!
And we can do it.
Yeah.
Bernie started out with nothing, with a really low number. And because of us,
Woo! Woo!
really shout, because it's our time. I hear a political revolution coming.
Woo! Right. Bernie, 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 Bernie.
We're gonna do some tuning in with the audience now. I'm not sure how this is gonna work because I didn't do a rehearsal for this. Yeah, okay. Right here with the mics? Okay, there you go. I'm sorry.
Pleased to meet you. I've traveled a long way to ask you this question, and you've touched on it a little bit, so sorry if it's repetitive. But with the devastation of all kinds of neighborhoods, black, white, way down south, impoverished white neighborhoods, due to the predatory lending, foreclosures, and other factors driving property values down, what solution can you offer to bring equality to public education without resorting to privatization of education and commodification of children?
You asked a lot in that one question. I was in, this kind of blew me away. I was in the neighborhood where Freddie Gray in Baltimore was killed there a number of months ago. And what really astounded me is that in a major American city, a very beautiful city in many respects, in that community, there was not a grocery store. So, so people could not get fresh produce, could not get meat. They had to go to these small little shops where the prices were high and we got beer and potato chips.
Wow.
In that neighborhood, there was not a bank branch. What they got was payday lenders at outrageous interest rates, thievery, usury interest rates. So when we talk about rebuilding America and rebuilding inner city life in America, that is exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about stopping gentrification, which is really causing problems all across this country, driving rents up. And I gotta tell you, I grew up, first 18 years of my life in a 3.5-room rent-controlled apartment in Brooklyn. All right, so I know a little bit about this thing. All right, so we need to control gentrification. We need to build affordable housing. We need to invest in public education in this country. We need to honor and respect teachers, make sure they are treated.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you another area. And again, when we think outside of the box, we have a dysfunctional child care and pre-K system in this country. 0 through 4 is the most important years, or the most important years of human development. All right, we all know that. And yet you have instructors, teachers, or people working with little kids who make what McDonald's workers make.
Yeah.
They have no benefits, they have no training. Why is that? Who made that decision that millions of kids would be taken care of people who do not have the training or the education or the kind of respect that they deserve. We have to do all of these things. Now people say, well, Bernie, this gets back to the point, the question Charlemagne asked a while ago. Is these wild and crazy and very expensive ideas? And the answer is, yeah, they are, but it's less expensive than bailing out Wall Street. It's less expensive than going to war in Iraq. It is less expensive than giving tax breaks to billionaires. We can do these things. Yeah, they sound idealistic, but if we have, and think what it means if kids from 0 to 4 get high quality pre-K education, they're ready for the first grade. And if we have free tuition in public colleges and universities and strong public education, what does it mean to this country? Is this something that we in America are unable to do? I don't believe that. We can do it. But to do it, we're going to have to change our national priorities. To change our national priorities, we are going to have to take on the greed and selfishness of Wall Street and corporate America.
Senator Sanders, welcome. My name is Linda Kumalo, and the drug issue is very personal to me. My brother, his name is Bongani Calhoun, also known as 290-23280. He is in federal prison on a 15-year minimum drug sentencing.
Wow.
My little brother, he wants me to call him younger brother, was caught up in a federal drug sting. 2 people he knows had been meeting with DEAs as seller. DEAs were the sellers, the guys were buyers for 2 months. When the DEAs decided to take them down, they took everybody down who was with them.
Wow.
They charged everybody with the same sentence, knowing very well that the other 5 were nowhere on their sides for 2 months. Because we didn't have money, my brother was nearly pressured by his public defender to take a plea. When my brother, because of course you're going to serve 2 years or 15 or 20, which one is?
Right here, hold on.
Most people take the 2. We said, you didn't do anything, we know what the situation is.
But you know.
My brother nearly signed the plea that was sent to him by FedEx. His public defender signed the plea and then sent it to him by FedEx. The case is in Texas. I told my brother right away, tell him you don't want to take a plea being forced to. He did so. He got a court-appointed attorney. Well, nice guy, but was on the job training. The assistant DA made a comment during the trial. With all that money, with Hispanics and blacks, didn't a light bulb go off in your head that this was a drug deal? The on-the-job training attorney did not object. The case went all the way to the Supreme Court. Justice Sotomayor's opinion made national news in February of 2013. What happened in that courtroom should never happen. I'm paraphrasing. It's online, anyone can look it up. But because the attorney did not object, there was nothing they could do. My brother just finished his 3rd year. It's 3 years now that he's in prison, basically on a technicality. When are we going to let these people out who are in there not because they are guilty, but because once you are charged and you cannot defend yourself, your life is gone.
Years and years ago, decades ago, in a very important Supreme Court decision, it was the Miranda case. What the Supreme Court said is that everybody has the constitutional right to have legal representation. But what has happened over the years is that legal representation has been more in name than in reality for many people. And I can't remember, I apologize, and if anyone can remember, jump up and tell me. There was a piece of the paper the other day, I can't remember, one of the states where they are paying their public defenders almost nothing. The public defenders are completely over. What state was it? Louisiana, I think that's right.
Every state.
Well, in many, that's right. No, that's right. Right. But there was one case where from almost any sense of reality, poor people did not have legal representation. There were very few attorneys. They had incredibly large caseloads. They could not pay attention to the cases that were before them. So that is not legal representation. So for you, you have raised some very important issues. Number one, does everybody in America, regardless of income, are they entitled to good legal representation? The answer is yes. And all over this country, as state budgets become under attack, it's very easy for governors to cut back on public defenders, and it's very hard for any serious person, graduates law school, or is an attorney, to go out and want to do public defender when you're being paid, very, very low wages. So we have got to honor what the Supreme Court said, and that is everybody in America is entitled to good legal representation. Number two, you raised the other issue, the broader issue of drugs in America and the war on drugs and so forth. And I can't get into the details of the case because I don't know all that much about the details of that case, but I can say this, that we need to fundamentally rethink the war on drugs, all right? We need, and broadly, aside from the issues that you have raised, when we deal with the problem of drugs in this country, which is a serious problem in terms of addiction and opiate abuse and heroin abuse, we need to look at it as a health issue, not a criminal issue. And thirdly, President Obama has just begun, to do, I think, what you're talking about, and taking a look at people who are in jail, who have been in jail for a very long time, who should not, that's right, 28 years. Well, and that is exactly what I'm talking about, the need to rethink. Okay. All right, so many lives have been hurt and destroyed. So these are very important issues, and I thank you for your willingness to come before us and raise them. And thanks for it.
I wish we had time for one more, but we don't. I wish we did, but we don't. They're telling me to wrap. So I hope that you know the information.
Most of us mix our morals, our values, and our beliefs, right? You grew up 18 years as a Jewish man in Brooklyn, and I read on Wikipedia this money you actually studied in Israel for a year. Once in Israel for a year. As you know, the Zionist Jews, and I don't need to defend anybody, all right, they run the Federal Reserve, they run Wall Street, they run everything.
Listen, is that your question?
I'm proud to be, okay, no, that's not what you're asking. No, that's not what you're asking. Okay. I am proud to be Jewish, but the idea...
Right. Woo! Bernie!
Let
him talk, brother. Brother, let him talk. Let him talk.
All right, let me just say this on the issue. I'm proud to be Jewish, but you're not going to find any candidate running for president, for example, talk about Zionism and the Middle East. I am a strong defender of Israel, but I also believe that we have got to pay attention to the needs of the Palestinians. There are wonderful people, and I've met them on both sides of that issue, and there are bad people on both sides of that issue.
Right.
If we are going to bring peace, hopefully, God willing, in the Middle East, we're going to have to treat both sides with respect and equality. All right?
Woo!
All right, let me just... Okay.
Oh, come on. Boo!
Now, Senator Turner, you want to give us some closing remarks?
Bernie, 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 Bernie.
So the last comment the gentleman said was gentrification. Pardon me 1 second. The last comment the gentleman said was that gentrification is real. And Senator Sanders has spoken on that. So I think that it is great. I think that it is great. And I know. And he said it. And he talked about it. And we can continue to have the conversation. But I think what's important is that tonight, that there are folks that came here that have differences of opinions, but we can have a conversation.
Right. Right.
Let me thank all of you for coming out. Erica, thanks for all you're doing.